President Obama delivers his State of the Union address with foreign policy hotspots getting hotter and domestic proposals already getting major pushback on Capitol Hill. This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Brett Baer. We're about 3 hours from the start of President Obama's next to last State of the Union speech. But this time the president will be on what has become GOP home turf, a Capitol building in complete political control of Republicans. And that means a focus on plans for massive tax increases and a middle-class tax cut as a volatile and dangerous foreign landscape is exploding are already getting eye rolls from a skeptical audience. One of the biggest skeptics, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, will join us next. But first, Chief White House Correspondent Ed Henry is live tonight with a preview of the address. Good evening, Ed.
Good evening, Brett. Aides say the president wants to tout some of that progress in the economy, yet some major international crises may wind up getting in the way. For every State of the Union address, there are the images the White House wants the public to see, such as President Obama in the Oval Office today making final preps. Then there are the images of the world burning that the president wants to spend far less time on tonight, like the deepening crisis in Yemen, where the U.S.-backed government is facing a coup, onto ISIS terrorists demanding a $200 million ransom for 2 Japanese hostages, and also today, Iran signing a military alliance with Russia.
I'm not sure how much time President Obama will devote to the very serious threats facing this nation, but I think Americans in such uncertain times, first and foremost crave some safety and security, and they're craving leadership.
Yemen in flames as Shiite rebels took over the presidential palace, while shots were fired at a U.S. embassy vehicle, though there were no injuries reported there. All of this embarrassing for the commander-in-chief, who 4 short months ago held it up as a success story.
We've targeted al-Qaeda's affiliate in Yemen and recently eliminated the top commander of its affiliate in Somalia. This strategy of taking out terrorists who threaten us while supporting partners on the front lines is one that we have successfully pursued in Yemen and Somalia for years.
That may be one reason the president created another image today, holding a surprise meeting with people who had written him personal letters and whose stories will be highlighted tonight, as he puts less emphasis on national security and more on his plans to double down on tax-the-rich policies that paint him as the guardian of the middle class.
Our economy is demonstrating some real resilience. What that creates us an opportunity to do right now is to focus on policies that will benefit the middle class, and the president actually thinks that by doing that, that's the best way we can grow our economy.
The point is the president will focus more on domestic policies that will shape his legacy and the 2016 campaign, even though those plans are going nowhere fast in the new Republican Congress.
An absolute non-starter. Let's remember that last year we had the all-time record number of receipts of dollars coming into the United States Treasury. And what do the Democrats want to do? Their insatiable desire, we want to raise taxes and pour hundreds of billions of additional dollars into government. That's not going to help grow the economy.
Now, aides also say the president will be touting some cooperation tonight with the Republicans, though they're also hinting he will be defiant at other times by teeing up more vetoes and, yes, more executive action. Brett?
Ed Henry live on the North Lawn. Ed, thank you. Moments ago, I spoke with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. I asked him what he's expecting tonight.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be another campaign speech. I wish the president would remember that he's not running again. He's got 2 years left. No point in making a campaign speech. What I'd love to see, since the American people have given us divided government, and divided government frequently has done very significant things for the country, is an emphasis on things that we could agree on. And there are a few, like trade, comprehensive tax reform, maybe infrastructure. But if you look at what they've released before the speech, you'd make it think the president was going to run for re-election.
Take a listen to the White House press secretary this morning talking about this plan, this tax plan.
We've got 58 consecutive months of private sector job growth. In the third quarter of last year, we saw the strongest growth in one quarter as we've seen in more than a decade. So our economy is demonstrating some real resilience. What that creates us an opportunity to do right now is to focus on policies that will benefit the middle class. And we can actually close the trust fund loophole. We can raise the capital gains rate back to the level it was under President Reagan and actually use that revenue to make sure that middle class kids can go to college, that working families, working mom and dads can actually get an extra tax credit to help them afford child care.
So they've got it down to the talking points. What's your response?
Well, it's great that the economy is picking up. Nothing like low gas prices to make that happen, and I think that's terrific. The question is whether it's a good idea to raise taxes on anybody at this particular point. I mean, we don't need a tax increase. The president got several of them already. The rates are very high on the most successful people in the country, and basically what he's suggesting is that we levy a tax on small businesses. And I think that's the last thing we ought to be doing. He's certainly correct that the middle class has not enjoyed any kind of recovery. If there's been a recovery, it's been among the people at the top, who, ironically, under this president who's always talking about how terrible it is that people at the top are somehow getting away with something, they've made out in fine fashion during the Obama years. It's the middle and lower income people who are behind. And that's because there's been an uneven recovery, benefiting only those at the top, getting the economy going, doing things like improving the Keystone Pipeline, which is on the floor of the Senate right now, that would create 42,000 jobs according to his State Department, is the kind of thing we ought to be doing.
All right, so they have a lot of bullet points that obviously the president's going to hit on in the majority of this speech tonight. They say by November 2014 was already the best year of job growth since 1999. Much of the overall wage growth exceeded inflation. The deficit as a share of economy down by 2/3. Healthcare employer premiums grew at the lowest rate on record, lowest healthcare price inflation in a half century, and on energy, the U.S. is leading work in oil and natural gas production, solar and wind up as well.
Some of those things are true. The government had absolutely nothing to do with the energy boom that we're experiencing. The job creation, if you look at the number of people looking for work, the number of people looking for work is at the lowest level since the Carter administration. So a whole lot of people have just given up and dropped out. Look, I'm glad the economy is getting better, but it's not morning again in America. You would not be able to convince working class Americans and lower income Americans that they have benefited from the policies of this administration. And basically what the president's apparently going to offer tonight is more of the same. Tax and spend, tax and spend.
We asked people to tweet in some questions. One of them came from Jay Murray. He said, could you ask Senator McConnell what, if anything, he thinks they have a 67 vote threshold on, a veto-proof majority on? Is there an issue that you can convince enough Democrats to override a veto?
Well, I hope so, but look, the president doesn't set the agenda in the Senate. He's trying to tell us what we should and shouldn't debate based upon what he intends to do with it. We were elected by the American people, too. They chose divided government. They chose a Republican Congress. The president doesn't set our agenda. I hope that he will end up agreeing with us on some of the initiatives that we're going to pass, most of which will enjoy bipartisan support, members of his own party supporting, like the Keystone Pipeline. But if he chooses not to do it, then the American people will understand we just have a different point of view about how to get the country moving again.
So do you see this as a first card that he's putting down in the negotiation? Or do you think that it's so far apart from what you've heard that this is just a vision for his legacy and his party?
Well, it's hard to be encouraged by the utterances the president has made in almost a defiant way since the November election, which was an overwhelming defeat for his political party, not only in congressional elections, but at the state and local level as well. I don't think the American people were sending a message they were happy or wanted more of the same. They were saying, we want a fully divided government. We'd like for you guys to figure out some things you can agree on. But they were not saying that they wanted the President of the United States to set the agenda in the new majority in the United States Senate. We're going to do what we think the American people expect us to do, try to move the country in a different direction. I hope he'll sign on. But if he doesn't, the American people will understand we just have a different point of view.
On foreign policy, you have a different point of view as well. As you look around the world at the map, you have Yemen today, Libya, news out of Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Iran signing a military deal with Russia today, the troubles in Ukraine. What do you say about this administration's, this president's foreign policy?
Well, you know, he went to Cairo in the first year of his term and said if we just talked to our adversaries more, things would be better. He mistakenly did not leave a residual force behind in Iraq. When the Ukrainians asked for military assistance to defend themselves, we sent them blankets and meals ready to eat. I think our adversaries around the world think that America is in retreat. And so they react accordingly, feeling that they can be pretty aggressive. Take the Iran nuclear issue. We've already had 2 extensions. There'll probably be a 3rd. The Iranians know the president loves to talk.
Will sanctions go forward?
I hope so. I mean, I think that what the Iranians need to know, and I think what we could be helpful to the president on, even though he doesn't want it, is to say to them, if at the end of the current discussion, supposedly to end this summer, there is no deal, you get tougher sanctions. You don't get them now, but you get them only if there's no outcome.
And you don't think that blows up the deal?
No, because the talks continue, but you know there needs to be an end date to it, or you get a worse case of sanctions. The second part of this is if there is an agreement, it needs to come to Congress to be approved so that we have part ownership of this as well. The American people don't expect this policy to be 100% unilateral on behalf of the president only.
Guantanamo Bay, the president, this administration seems adamant that they're going to close it one way or another. Is Congress going to let them? Yeah,
we're going to do everything we can to prevent that. Guantanamo Bay is the perfect place for these foreign terrorists. Remember, these are not American citizens. The administration's policy has been twofold. Either to kill them with drones, and I don't necessarily oppose that, but a dead terrorist can't talk, or to capture a terrorist overseas and put them in a U.S. court where they're given a lawyer and told to shut up. The most important thing you can get from a terrorist is information. And Guantanamo Bay is a perfect place for the location of foreign terrorists who can give us information to thwart the next attack.
Last thing, do you expect to be standing up and applauding much tonight?
Well, I'm going to applaud for trade, and there may be a few other lines, but I think it entirely depends on how the president presents himself.
Senator, as always, thank you.
Thank you, Brett.
Please join me for complete coverage of the president's address and the Republican response. We'll begin at 8:55 Eastern Time. We'll have an expanded panel. George Will, Juan Williams, Steve Hayes, and Nina Easton. And Wisconsin Republican Congressman Paul Ryan will join us live. And you can let us know what you think throughout the night using the hashtag Fox News Chat. Up next, how tonight's State of the Union address sets the stage for the 2016 presidential race. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 45 in Baltimore has 6 members of a family are unaccounted for after a fierce fire reduced a multi-million-dollar waterfront mansion near Annapolis to scorched stone framework. Relatives say they believe the 6 were inside at the time of the blaze. Still investigating. KHON in Honolulu, where pro golfer Robert Allenby thanks a woman who he says saved his life. He credits her with that. Allenby says he was kidnapped, robbed, and beaten Friday night. The woman says she saw Allenby arguing with 2 men and intervened. Allenby says he does not remember most of what happened. And this is a live look at Cincinnati from Fox 19 and the scene of a deadly construction accident that has shut down the southbound lanes of heavily traveled Interstate 75. An overpass collapsed and killed a worker last night. Officials are not sure when those lanes will reopen. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.